Hello everybody, welcome back to another episode of Decoding the Unknown. As always, I'm your host Simon. Welcome! Today's episode, the Ica Stones, ancient dinosaur drawings that shouldn't exist. I get the feeling this one's going to be pretty easy to debunk. No one's drawing dinosaurs. Thank you, Ilza, for writing it. I'm Simon, I'm reading it, and that's what we do here, isn't it? According to the great philosophers, it's the ability to use complex language which separates man and beast. Also, we're just a lot smarter than those stupid beasts, except for dolphins. I mean, obviously they're dumber than us, but dolphins are smart and shit. Comparing notes about the most effective method of mammoth hunting and asking women to help him find his keys is probably where it all started, but it didn't take long for the concept of art and eventually writing to come about. For me, I bet it did take long. In the grand scheme of things, probably not long. But in, normal human living terms, very, very long. From ancient Egypt to the Australian outback, once man figured out how to write, he just couldn't stop. Rock, paper, bathroom stalls. If there's a surface, there's a picture, a witty phrase, a phone number. A drawing of a penis. We've learned a lot about ancient cultures from this art and writing that they left behind, like ancient tax laws and who's up for a good time. But there's always more to learn. However, sometimes it seems that the archaeological world just ignores what doesn't fit into the accepted worldview. At least, this seems to be the case with the infamous Ica stones found in the deserts of Peru. And yes, Peru has a desert, it's not just rainforests and jungles. Depicting images that simply don't fit into the established timeline of our world, the Ica stones are a conspiracy trifecta. Ancient astronauts, dinosaurs, and humans coexisting, and even Atlantis. Yes, is it equal? Where? Aliens? Ancient astronauts, that counts as aliens, right? Yes, it's all of them. The Ica stones have a little something for everyone. Debate is still raging almost 50 years after their discovery, so I'll let you decide. Are the Ica stones a modern archaeological hoax of epic proportions or a valuable insight into our human past? If you're online, which, you are right now, your personal data is being tracked, sold, and probably stored somewhere that you've never heard of. Oh, almost certainly today's sponsor, Surfshark VPN. Well, that is where Surfshark VPN steps in. Surfshark encrypts your connection so no one, not your ISP, no advertisers, no random Wi-Fi snoopers can see what you're doing. You can change your virtual location with one click, access content from anywhere, and stay private even on public networks. Plus, one account covers unlimited devices, so whatever you got your phone, you got your laptop, you got your smart fridge. Probably not. But whatever you want to protect, you can with Surfshark VPN. So go to surfshark.com/DTU or use the code DTU at checkout to get 4 extra months of Surfshark for free. That's surfshark.com/DTU, code DTU for the deal. And now back to today's episode. The story begins. In May 1966, Dr. Javier Cabrera Dacia, a respected physician, received a most unusual birthday gift from a childhood friend, one Felix Llosa Romero. It was a heavy oval-shaped stone, and while that might not seem like a particularly great gift to you and me, indeed it doesn't, Romero knew about Cabrera's interest in Peruvian history and thought the stone, engraved with the image of a basic fish, would make a nice little paperweight. Cabrera was delighted with the gift. Turns out this wasn't the first time that he'd come across a stone like this. Around 30 years earlier, when Cabrera was still a teen, his father owned land in Salas, a district in the Ica province of Peru. While land was being cleared for planting, the workers uncovered a similar stone. It was carved with the image of a bird, which young Javier didn't recognize. The workers believed the stone had been carved by the Inca people. Inca artifacts like ceramics, textiles, and even human remains were fairly common in the area. Cabrera was fascinated by this stone, but soon enrolled in medical school to start his adult journey as a medical doctor and completely forgot about the stone, which, unfortunately, seemed to have been lost along the way. Romero couldn't have gotten a better gift for his good friend if he'd tried. Not only did it send Cabrera on a short trip down memory lane, it would completely change the course of his life and his career, for better or for worse. Oh wait, is he going to go back and then be like, yeah, the dinosaur drawing stones, and he gives up his whole life to be a dinosaur stone drawing dude? Cabrera was intrigued by the carving. It was a fish he didn't recognize, and he firmly believed it was an extinct species of fish, one that went extinct long before man came along. Curious, Cabrera wondered where his friend had found the stone and if there were more. Romero had gotten the stone from his brother, who had a small collection, but he told Cabrera that if he was really interested in the stones, he should contact the Soldi brothers. Carlos and Pablo Soldi owned a plantation in Ocacaye, and they had the biggest collection of these stones at the time. Some they found while excavating ancient tombs on their own land in 1955, and others they bought from huaqueros. Oh, that's tomb raiders who looted tombs for artifacts which they sold to archaeology buffs. I bet the archaeologists are not super happy about it, but they're like, what are you going to do? We got to get our special stones from somewhere. Apparently, the brothers had tried for years to get archaeologists involved in studying the origin of the stones, but no one was interested. Eager to learn more, Cabrera paid a visit to the Soldi brothers to inspect their collection in person, and he wasn't disappointed. The variety of images carved onto the stones was amazing. Birds, lizards, spiders, snakes, fish, frogs, and llamas. People hunting and fishing. But there were also some unfamiliar animals. Snakes with small wings on their spines, birds with horns, insects with pincers longer than their bodies, and even fish with wings. Captivated by these stones, Cabrera suddenly realized just how important these stones were to understanding the ancient cultures in Peru, and he decided that these stones had to be studied. Right around this time, just by chance, Cabrera was asked to found and direct the Casa de Cultura del Ica, an institution devoted to the promotion of science and letters in the region, affiliated with the Casa de Cultura del Peru in Lima. Personally, I'm a little bit confused as to why a respected medical doctor would be asked to found and run an institution for the study of archaeology and history, but stranger things have happened. Well, I imagine this is just a passion of his, right? Like, he's a doctor by day and he's just really interested in history and archaeology by night. He probably sits on some board of some museum or something, like doctors want to do. And like, I don't know, he's just into it and they're like, you should go do it, you're from there. Because his dad was a farmer there or something in Ica, right? With this new position behind his name, Cabrera approached the director of the Regional Museum of Ica after learning that they too had a collection of engraved stones. Their collection was held in storage, it wasn't on display, but the director was happy to let Cabrera take a look. According to the director, he'd been told by a friend of his that the stones weren't actually found by the Hueros, they were made and then sold as genuine artifacts to gullible collectors. Oh, okay. Probably why they're not on display then. This would be my first thinking, that it's just, someone's just carving out a snake on a rock, dirtying it up a bit and being like, yo, archaeologists, you want to buy this shit or what? Got it from a tomb. Definitely didn't make it in my kitchen. Being a medical doctor with some science under his belt, Cabrera asked if these assumptions were backed up by any laboratory tests or research, but once again the director insisted that lab tests and proper study weren't necessary. The whole thing was one big fraud. However, Cabrera wasn't willing to let it go. He'd been bitten by the bug, the archaeology bug. He wanted to learn more about these stones, so he used his own money and started buying more stones to put on display at the Casa de Cultura de Oca. Now, before we continue, we need to pause for a moment. The stones were made famous, or infamous depending on your stance, by Javier Cabrera, but he wasn't the first to show an interest in them. The stones have been mentioned before. Apparently, the very first stones were recorded by Father Simon, a Spanish missionary accompanying the famous conquistador Francisco Pizarro, who was on a mission from God and Spain to convert the natives by relieving them of their lands, their gold, and if they were really uncooperative, their lives. It's like, what you mean? I'm going to convert them to Catholicism or kill them. Conquistadors. Then in 1572, Spanish explorers sent some of these strange engraved stones back to Spain, but it's unclear what happened to them. Unfortunately, I couldn't find the original source, so while this is interesting, the truth of this tale is a little uncertain. Later, the indigenous Peruvian chronicler Juan de Santa Cruz Pachuto Yamqui, hell of a name there, mate, who lived towards the end of the 16th century, wrote that at the time of the Inca Pachacutec, the ninth Sapper Inca of the chiefdom of Cusco, many engraved stones were found in the kingdom of Chincha in Chimchayunga. Oh my lord, these names, guys, which is today known as Ica. That's quite a mouthful, but the point is that an indigenous Peruvian chronicler apparently mentions engraved stones, though who made them or what happened to them is unknown. For the next 400 years, there seemed to be no mention of any engraved stones. But in 1965, journalist Herman Buce published a book about the Ica stones. According to Buce, in 1961, 5 years before Cabrera became involved, flooding of the Ica River uncovered a cave where a large number of these engraved stones were discovered, presumably by the Huaqueros, and sold mostly to the Soldi brothers, but the stones soon became a roaring trade to anyone interested in antiquities. In the late 50s and early 60s, the curator of the Callao Naval Museum managed to acquire some of the engraved stones from some Huaqueros living around Ococalle, and by 1973, around 300 stones were on display. Apparently, they claimed that there were large deposits of these engraved stones around 20 miles southwest of Ica, near Ococalle and the Ica River, found in graves and caves. In 1974, the director of the Peruvian Aeronautical Museum stated that he had no doubt that these stones were authentic and a message from an advanced civilization. Oh shit, okay. By this time, the Aeronautical Museum had a decent-sized collection of stones found at various locations around Peru, not just Ococalle. Unfortunately, none of these people are archaeologists, paleontologists, or experts in ancient history as far as I'm aware, so no scholarly research was being done on these engraved stones. Yeah, because I feel like the real archaeologists are like, they're not real, guys. They're not real. It's not worth looking into, okay? Okay? One man's obsession. And this brings us back to Dr. Cabrera, a man now on a mission to study and preserve the Ica stones, since traditional archaeology clearly wasn't interested in doing the job. Because they know they immediately know they're not real. They look at them and be like, nope, not even worth the money spent looking at them in a lab. The collection may have started with one little stone carved with an unfamiliar fish, but it would grow exponentially. Cabrera started by buying around 300 stones from the Soldi brothers, Carlos and Pablo. However, it seems he wasn't all that picky, buying stones from whoever would sell them, until he finally crossed paths with a farmer called Basilio Uchuya, who claimed to have found a huge cache of these stones when the Ica River flooded its banks, exposing an unknown cave. Presumably this is the 1961 flood mentioned by Herman Buse, but we don't really know for sure. He refused to reveal the exact location of the treasure trove, but agreed to sell thousands of these stones to Cabrera, growing his collection to 11,000 stones by the 70s. Today, the collection consists of 15,000 stones. Good lord. At this point in the story, I'm very much believing that someone just carved these to sell to gullible people. 15,000, a fuckload of stones to carve. I guess a lot of people could have been carving them, right? The Ica stones are composed of grey andesite, a type of rock, and they come in all shapes and sizes from pebbles to boulders. The smallest of Cabrera's collection weighed around 15 to 20 grams, while the largest weighed in at 500 kilos. Holy shit. Americans, that's like nearly half a ton. Ton and ton, metric and imperial are quite similar. It's like half a ton. The stones seem to be heavily weathered and covered with a layer of thin patina, also called desert varnish, an orange-yellow to black coating often found on exposed rock in desert environments. This varnish is mostly made up of particles of clay, trace elements of organic matter, and oxides of things like iron and manganese. This patina gives the stones another unique feature, a range of colors with grey, black, yellowish, and pinkish, all part of the artistic palette. The stones are very hard and difficult to carve, so according to some arguments, it couldn't have been done by ancient man, as they didn't have the right tools for the job. However, the stones aren't actually carved. The images are scratched onto the surface by scraping off the patina to reveal the greyish andesite stone underneath, which would have been perfectly possible with stone tools, and also easier for someone who's making them in the modern day, right? The images carved on the stones range in complexity, but can basically be divided into two groups: the realistic depictions and the more fantastical depictions. The realistic images are the kind of things that you'd expect, and the kind of thing that fits in with what we know about ancient cultures. Images like local fish, flowers, and living animals, and more abstract designs that can be traced back to the Paracas, Nazca, Tiwanaku, and Inca cultures. These are the most common. Some images also correspond with well-known petroglyphs like the monkey depicted in the Nazca lines. However, we also have the more imaginative carvings, which makes this a Decoding the Unknown script and not a chapter in a history textbook. These carvings include extinct animals like a 5-toed llama and a giant sloth bear. But most importantly, dinosaurs. People hunting dinosaurs. Nope, you're so far off on the timeline. Dinosaurs retaliating and eating people, and people riding dinosaurs. Guys, I'm sorry, this is so fake. Do we really need all these other pages? People riding fucking dinosaurs? No, this isn't the fucking Flintstones. It seems ancient man's relationship with dinosaurs was somewhat complicated. There are also depictions of advanced surgery, blood transfusions, C-sections, organ transplants, and even brain surgery. Please. We also see advanced technologies, telescopes, flying machines, pyramids, and star maps depicting 13 constellations. the usual 12 we see studied by other ancient civilizations, as well as the constellation of Pleiades. Some stones even have world maps accurately depicting what the world probably looked like around 13 million years ago. And let's not forget the kangaroos carved on stone in South America. Either they're very strong swimmers, or Noah dropped them off at the wrong continent. Immediately, I'm like, oh, it's fake. Like when it was snakes and birds and shit, you'd be like, okay, cool. Yeah, fine, maybe. But people riding dinosaurs, guys, you pushed it too far. You just pushed it too far. In 1967, Cabrera gave a collection of 33 stones to a good friend of his, Luis Hochschild. He was a mining engineer and vice president of Mauricio Hochschild Mining Co., based in Lima, and asked if it would be possible for their labs to perform an analysis of the stones to determine the antiquity of the engravings. He got a report back from geologist Eric Wolf, which stated that the stone was naturally shaped andesite rock, shaped most likely by water, so andesite river rocks. Sounds a bit like a band. He also noted that on some of the stones, the natural oxidation which covered the stones also covered some of the engravings. Since it takes a while for this patina to form, it could be useful in determining when the stones were engraved. All that proves, though, is that the stones probably weren't newly made. However, Cabrera decided that it meant the stones were ancient, which is a bit of a liberal interpretation of the findings, but imaginative interpretations is kind of Cabrera's thing, as we'll see later. Yep, no surprises there. There was no irregular wear on the edges of the incision of the engravings, which suggested to Wolf that the stones were buried soon after being carved. He also sent some samples to the University of Bonn in Germany. Their results agreed with Wolf's analysis of the stones. They suggested the best way to date the stones would be to look at the strata in which the stones were found. However, since no one was willing to admit where they got the stones, which is not suspicious at all, studying the strata is impossible. Cabrera applied for permission to excavate the approximate zone in 1970, but his request was denied because they're like, stop chasing this bunk. After many failed attempts to get the academic community interested in studying the stones, Cabrera concluded that no one was interested because the archaeologists and scientific community in general were selfishly clinging to the accepted history of the world and refused to consider the possibility that humans and dinosaurs lived together, or that there was an advanced civilization predating our own. Down with mainstream archaeology! Down with it all! Burn it to the ground! The unwillingness blinded them to the story the stones had to tell, and instead of considering the value of the stones were simply declared fake and written off by the academic community. Thus it fell on Cabrera to rescue the stones abandoned by those who should have valued them, study the stones to understand the story that they had to tell, and protect them for future generations. Perhaps one day more enlightened archaeologists would be willing to take the stones seriously. He eventually abandoned his medical career and went from being a respected doctor to an eccentric stone collector, opening his own museum displaying his collection in 1996. Eventually, he also wrote a book, The Message of the Engraved Stones of Ica. And while I didn't read it all, the bits that I read were, well, let's just go with interesting, shall we? Oh, it's going to be filled with such nonsense. Why are you on this adventure? Just go back to being a normal doctor who's a little bit interested in stones. After years of research, Cabrera concluded that the images engraved on the stones aren't just decorative. It's actually a form of writing. Yeah, okay, what's this? That's a man riding a dinosaur. Also the letter C. What the fuck? Similar to the writing systems like Egyptian hieroglyphics or ancient Sumerian. What, that they just carved on individual stones? So it's just one word on each stone. Why? The Stone Library tells the true history of mankind, which differs somewhat from what science tells us about the development of humanity. According to these stones, in the remote past, around 405 million years ago, back when dinosaurs were still cavorting in the jungles, a cultivated, highly advanced civilization was already flourishing, happily sharing the planet with these giant lizards. One, they just happen to look exactly like us from 405 million years. Please. I'm guessing not in the Okakaye Desert, since that would have been underwater, but let's not get technical here. Yeah, underwater according to mainstream archaeology, which as we know is just bullshit, Ilsa. The civilization was even more advanced than we are today. They already had a deep understanding of superior technologies like brain transplants and space travel, which we've yet to master. In fact, this civilization was so advanced they'd figured out how to convert solar and cosmic energy directly into fuel for the body, the mind, and all those spacecraft, a bit like a plant does through the process of photosynthesis. That's immediately what I was going to say. It's like, what? So photosynthesis. You might wonder why a civilization this advanced would leave their records carved in stone. I mean, I know I did, but stone is a pretty durable material, unlike paper or electronics. It'll survive most disasters for millions of years. There are plenty of similar writing systems using images carved in stone. However, the Ica stones stand out due to their sheer abundance, the quality of the engravings, and the wealth of information they contain. So, to differentiate the Ica stones from the incomprehensible, garbled scribbles of other cultures, Cabrera decided to name his stones glyptoliths, and the people that made the stones, and so thoughtfully left them behind, buried in a Peruvian desert, glyptolithic humanity. Do you think the people who carved these, like the people who are just, making these trinkets to sell to gullible tourists or whatever, they're just looking at this guy and his career that he's given up to pursue these stones, and they're just sitting around the dinner table having moved on to their next scam or whatever, being like, that guy, what the fuck? Should we tell him? Should we tell him, Jose? Studying thousands of stones is going to take a bit of time, but Cabrera soon started noticing themes. So he started arranging the stones in his museum according to these themes to make up what he called his library of stone books. The themes included things like astronomy, biology, zoology, anthropology, transportation, rituals, fishing, hunting, and so on. The more complex themes also had more stones and often more detail engraved on larger stones. If something was really important, the creator would use bas relief to highlight the importance of the stone. Cabrera also started interpreting the stones. Apparently, the stones contained 3 different types of symbols. Firstly, a figure could symbolize whatever it represents. So a figure of a bird is just a bird. Secondly, in some contexts, the image could symbolize something related to the image. So, for example, a figure of a bird could refer to flight or aircraft, while an image of a camel, an animal suited to high temperatures, symbolize the planet overheating. Bro, you are stretching here. Finally, some symbols weren't recognizable images. They were more abstract designs, so a series of rectangles could symbolize human life or man's ability to reflect, while concentric circles symbolize spaceflight. Sometimes the combination of symbols could mean all kinds of abstract things. A primate holding a leaf suggests that the animal is about to attain the power of reason, which will elevate it from primate to man. What are you talking about? I can imagine that might be quite a shock on the system. One moment you're swinging the vines, and the next you're filling out tax returns. The leaps this man makes in order to force these stones to make sense are astounding. Truly, my dude. As a student of languages myself, not me, Ilza, short of smoking the good stuff or getting divine inspiration from above, I don't understand how Cabrera came to these conclusions. If it wasn't for the Rosetta Stone, we probably still wouldn't understand hieroglyphics, and it's not like Cabrera found an Ica equivalent to the Rosetta Stone. Of course it doesn't exist, does it? It should come as absolutely no surprise that it didn't take too long for Cabrera to decide that glyptolithic man, the creators of the stones, weren't from around here. And with here, I don't mean the Okakaya Desert. I mean Earth. I knew there were aliens. Aliens. The creators of the Ica stones came from the stars. They dropped in, like the neighborhood, and rounded up some smart primates, most likely North Arctus, a primate that died out 30 million years ago, to create new men on Earth through genetic engineering. New men? What, so the aliens just happened to be men? Humans. Simply put, they picked a smart lemur, which was more the size of a small bear, and made it even smarter. Dude, what are you smoking? What did you start smoking? You had a mental break or something, because this is just crazy. The sole pursuit of this new man was supposed to be the acquisition of knowledge and understanding, which is why this smart lemur man was far superior to modern man whose sole interest lies in material gain. I mean, not everyone. No wonder we're heading for another cataclysm. We've lost touch with our inner lemur. This is fully crazy. It's going off the rails. According to Cabrera, within his library of stone books lies the answer to any question you ever had about man's ancient past. A cataclysmic flood that almost wiped out humanity definitely happened, though it doesn't seem like the stones could help us find Noah's Ark. The stones also confirm the existence of 2 islands, which have since vanished. I speak, of course, of Atlantis and Mu. Robert Charoux, an avid student of the ancient civilization theory, believes that the Ica stones are the oldest evidence of man's existence on Earth and came from one of the secret sanctuaries where the men who once lived in Atlantis left testimonials of their highly advanced and sophisticated civilization. I don't understand. I just don't know. I feel like this is the same as the people who think Harry Potter's fucking real. Not real, but like they live in this delusion where they're like, oh no, I wish I could go to Hogwarts. Hogwarts could be real. Maybe it could be. It's made up! Stop it! You sound like you're mentally deranged, Robert Charoux. Charoux. How the fuck you pronounce your name? Of course, according to the ecostones, these islands and the continent of Lemuria, which also existed, didn't sink as Plato would have you believe. They simply moved and crashed into other land masses. It seems that someone read at least one article on the movement of tectonic plates, so well done. If anyone is curious, Lemuria apparently forms part of India today, and the Yeti, who haunts the Himalayas, is probably a descendant of the humanoids created by glyptolithic humanity, slowly regressing back into their animal form. What have you been smoking? It is probably crack cocaine. I guess the Yeti finally gave up on understanding tax law and stopped their pursuit of knowledge and understanding. And honestly, who can blame them? Cabrera's theories get even crazier the deeper down the rabbit hole you go. The stones provide a star map to the alien home world tucked away in the Pleiades system. Of course, myths of ancient man living for hundreds or thousands of years, myths of changelings and shapeshifters can all be explained by the brains of the wise being transplanted into younger bodies, allowing man to accumulate more knowledge and understanding. What about the people whose brains were in those younger bodies? They're just discarded. You're sacrificed for the elders. How advanced? I had to stop reading because I ran out of witty and scathing remarks, which led to an existential crisis since that's never happened before. Cabrera's desire to preserve ancient Peruvian history is commendable, except it's not ancient Peruvian history, it's made up. He even tried to convince the government to make more of an effort to protect the Ocacaye Desert and the wealth of artifacts and fossil remains buried in its sand from looters. However, at the end of the day, he was a medical doctor, not an archaeologist, a paleontologist, or a geologist, and his interest in these stones became a destructive obsession, in my humble opinion. Oh, me too. Cabrera passed away in 2001, and he probably took the most important mystery to his grave. What's that? He never explained why he thought that fish on the original carving that he got for his birthday, the one that set all this in motion, was an extinct species of fish. I mean, did he necessarily? I mean, I guess he did later, or whatever, but that was just the thing that sent him on this whole fucking insane journey where he gave up his career to become a pseudo-archaeologist. And even that would be generous. I say he just became a crackpot. Proof of dinosaurs. I mean, we have proof of dinosaurs. They're called fossils. I already mentioned the dinosaurs, but the depictions of dinosaurs and other extinct animals on the ecostones is one of the more famous pieces of evidence produced every time the debate of humans and dinosaurs sharing the planet Flintstone star comes up, so I'm going to delve into that a little bit deeper to see if we can actually make Simon's brain melt. My brain's not melting today. This dude's a crackpot, he smoked crack. I mean, he did smoke crack. Something happened to his brain. Cabrera believed, he's dead, right? I could say he smoked crack if I want to, because he's dead. You can't defame a dead person. Cabrera believed that the stones proved that humans and dinosaurs lived together 405 million years ago. However, this doesn't work for the young Earth creationists. They take the Bible and Genesis very literally and believe the Earth is only around 6,000 to 10,000 years old. Also insane. Therefore, the stones can't be billions of years old. Oh, no. The stones are a few thousand years old. But they prove the young Earth creationist point of view. Alright then, let's see where this goes, shall we? The Earth isn't millions of years old. Dinosaurs didn't die out 65 million years ago. All the evolutionary science is wrong, and Darwin really had no idea what he was talking about. However, the salient point here is that dinosaurs and humans clearly lived together, and the stones prove this. Firstly, the stones don't just depict dinosaurs and other extinct animals, but show a level of detail that simply wouldn't have been possible without close observation. The stones show reproductive cycles, feeding habits, and physical vulnerabilities of animals that were supposed to have gone extinct long before man showed up. Wow, that would be a really big mystery if it wasn't possible that someone had carved these stones in the modern day with all of that knowledge from fucking fossils. Jesus. Of course, some of the reproductive cycles depicted on the stones are a little different to what science tells us. For example, the giant bat, according to science, was a mammal. However, the stones reveal that the creature was closer to birds. So instead of being born like mammals, the young hatched from eggs like birds. It's a mammal, we know it's a fucking mammal! As for dinosaurs, according to the stones, they didn't lay eggs like lizards, they were more like amphibians. Instead of the young hatching from the egg fully formed, they were like frogs, starting out as tadpole-like creatures and finally developing into the dinosaurs that we know and love. How does a tadpole turn into a frog? I know it's a stupid question with a really obvious answer. It's the sort of stuff you study in primary school. My son is probably learning about this right now, and he's 4. Does it go into like a chrysalis, like a butterfly? Or does it just kind of grow some legs and I genuinely don't remember. Since it was unlikely that the Inca or even pre-Inca had such detailed knowledge of these animals, the only logical conclusion is that whoever carved the stones actually lived with these now extinct animals long before the first accepted civilizations arose in Peru. Glyptolithic man, the creators of the stone library, also had dinosaur ranches. One stone series in particular shows what appears to be a stegosaurus munching on some leaves, being hunted by men in a flying machine. Rhido, the tree in the image, probably symbolizes the ceiba plant, which was quite abundant in the Mesozoic era, and this proves that this was the stegosaurus's favorite food, and that these ancient humans specifically cultivated plantations of these plants to feed their stegosauruses. This is just so insane. I know I've said that like 1,600 times this episode, but Jesus, this is insane. Stop. I feel like this guy watched the Flintstones when he was high and came up with this theory. They would then hunt their prey by gassing them in order to paralyze them before injecting them with something, although images suggest that they also used electricity when hunting their dinosaurs. Capturing dinosaurs was apparently quite the undertaking. I mean, yeah, that I agree with. Another stone shows a young dinosaur carrying a man on its back. I suppose if you don't have a horse, you need to make another plan. From the series of images, we learn two things. Firstly, man didn't fear dinosaur, man farmed dinosaur. Secondly, riding on a dinosaur is the ultimate proof that the hold my beer mentality has been alive, well, since ancient times, where they had beer for sure. I mean, according to these rocks, they definitely had beer and it was better. However, Cabrera provided even more proof to get the creationists' hearts beating faster. In 1984, he discovered fossilized animal and plant specimens in the Oaxaca Desert, but his greatest discovery was a human backbone close to 3 incomplete sets of dinosaur backbones, Triceratops to be exact, as well as dinosaur eggs. How he could tell it was specifically the backbones of a Triceratops I'm not entirely clear on, considering he's a medical doctor, not an archaeologist or paleontologist, but okay then. He also discovered sections of skin of different species of dinosaurs close to the supposed eggs, and an almost complete skeleton of a phytosaur, an extinct reptile similar to a crocodile. He claims these discoveries are further proof of the truth of the stone library of Ica, since all of these things were discovered in the same rock strata, so all of these things lived at the same time, as told in the Ica stones. He also somehow manages to conclude, based on all this evidence, that not only did man and dinosaur live together, it was man who was the main cause of the dinosaur extinction. I know mankind is good at destroying things, but I don't think we can take credit for wiping out the dinosaurs. Apparently, there are also signs of flood in the Oaxaca Desert, so we now have the Great Flood, Atlantis, humans and dinosaurs coexisting. Advanced ancient civilization, alien interference in human development. All we need now is an entrance to Agartha, and we've hit the conspiracy jackpot. Oh no, you're missing something! The Jews needed to have plotted on. And the lizard people. The Jewish lizard people, yes! He plans to write a second book, proving that humanity lived in the Mesozoic, possibly on dinosaur ranches, but sadly for those who love his theories, but thankfully for me, he never got around to it. Young Earth creationists, and those who firmly believe humans and dinosaurs coexisted, are quick to point out that there are other artifacts that show dinosaurs. Ancient ceramics today, on display at the Museum of Lima, also show long-necked reptilian creatures, and tapestries found in tombs in the area show repeating patterns that could be dinosaurs, which believers insist prove that the ancient Peruvians were familiar with dinosaurs. Some of these artifacts showed up in the same tombs where some of the Ica stones were discovered, suggesting that the ancient Peruvians had some fascination with dinosaurs, and since they didn't have paleontology yet, it must mean that they lived with actual dinosaurs. Or alternatively, they're not pictures of dinosaurs. They're just like lizards. They're on rocks. Like, there's not a good frame of reference for size. In fact, there's even a dinosaur depicted in the Nazca lines, though I've not been able to find that one yet. Of course, these finds aren't just limited to Peru. Artifacts have been found around the world, from ancient Greece to China to Australia, to prove that humans and dinosaurs shared the planet. Some will even argue that we still share the planet with dinosaurs. Pterodactyls soar through the skies over American cities, and in the heart of Africa, Mekele Mbembe is patiently waiting to be found, because of course. This all sounds very exciting, and we have a bunch of theories, some of them a bit conflicting about what these stones prove. The existence of an advanced civilization that was far more technologically advanced than we are now, alien interference in human development, and humans and dinosaurs coexisting along with 5-toed llamas, giant sloths and mammoths. The planet must have been also rather crowded back then. Any of these theories could rewrite human history as we know it. However, before we start rewriting the history books and all convert to young Earth creationism, don't worry, also there was not much risk of that. Are the ecostones genuine artifacts, or are they very imaginative modern creations? Hoax or truth? It would seem that the easiest way to solve the mystery about the authenticity of the ecostones and what they're supposed to mean would simply be to date the artifacts. Carbon dating stuff is sort of what archaeologists do these days, right? However, stone doesn't contain any organic material, so in this instance, carbon dating is useless. Yeah, and even if they could, it's kind of like, well, they're carved. Even if they were carving something organic, then it'd be like, well, the organic material could have been from back in the day and they just carved it recently. Well, I suppose they'd have some clever way of working that out as well, wouldn't they? However, even if we could date the stone, that won't help much. The stones are no doubt millions of years old. What we need to date is when the carvings were made. Right, yes. For that, archaeologists would need to analyze and date the strata layer in which the stones were originally found. However, so far, no one is willing to give up the location of these amazing stones. The huaqueros have only one rule: don't tell anyone where you found the good stuff. So, as far as artifacts go, the ecostones are about as useful as the South African post office. That means all we have to work with are the images on the stones and the stories of those who claim to have found them. Does every country's post office suck? I was like, wait, I was in my office the whole day last week. And they were like, yeah, we're going to deliver you a package today. And I'm like, fantastic. And I'm waiting the whole day, and then I get a text message or a message on the postal app or whatever. It's saying like, we couldn't deliver your package today, so it's waiting for you at the post office. And I'm like, motherfuckers, you didn't even try. So after work, I have to go to the post office, wait in a queue for like 15 minutes, collect a fucking parcel. What the fuck? That means all we have to work with are images on the stones and the stories of those who claim to have found them. Since the dinosaur carvings are the first thing most people think of when it comes to the ecostones, I figure it's as good a place to start as any. How well do the dinosaur images compare with what we know about dinosaurs these days? Well, according to some young Earth creationists and others who believe that humans and dinosaurs lived together, the dinosaur depictions on the stones are oh so very accurate. God, it's weird that they'd say that, isn't it? In fact, they depict details we only learned fairly recently, things that weren't known in the 60s and early 70s when these stones first hit the headlines. Apparently, the stones showed dinosaurs walking with their heads down and tails up, a posture researchers only recently figured out. In the 60s and 70s, dinosaurs were thought to walk like Barney, the purple monstrosity with the most annoying song.
I love you, you love me, we're a happy family.
Some dinosaur images also show dinosaurs with crests on their heads, ridges on their backs, and detailed skin patterns that are all very recent discoveries. I haven't had the opportunity to study all 15,000 of Cabrera's stones myself, but I'm confident most critics will agree with me when I say that this is an impressive level of wishful thinking. Oh my yes. With the exception of one or two stones, the majority of the ecostones you'll find on the internet shows either dinosaurs standing upright, getting ready to bolt out another refrain about friendship and learning your ABCs, or four-footed animals that look like something my 7-year-old niece would draw. Critics also point out that what is supposed to be dermal ridges look more like shells that you'd find on a tortoise, while some dinosaurs are depicted with 5 fingers and toes. As one observer rightly points out, how did the carvers manage to spot detailed skin patterns but miss the gigantic hands and feet of the dinosaurs, which definitely didn't have 5 fingers and 5 toes? As for the few stones showing dinosaurs not dragging their tails, this isn't quite the slam dunk many young Earth creationists claim. Scientists actually realized dinosaurs didn't drag their tails by the early 70s. It is hardly a recent discovery. The fact of the matter is that the majority of the dinosaur depictions on the ecostones are similar to the popular idea of what dinosaurs looked like in the early 60s and 70s. What a coincidence! If the carvers of these stones lived with dinosaurs, they wouldn't have carved the dinosaurs standing upright. Clearly, the dinosaurs are no help, so perhaps we'll have better luck if we consider the people who uncovered the stones and sold them to the museums. Yes, maybe we should consider them. The reliable archaeologists that they are. Despite it being very illegal, grave robbery is a fairly lucrative endeavor in Peru. Selling antiquities can be a decent income for poor families, so grave robbing is rampant, meaning that many artifacts can end up in private collections instead of museums. Indiana Jones would have a field day. Now, before we get to the farmer, Basilio Uchuya, I'd actually like to go back even further to the two Soldi brothers who sold Cabrera his first 300 or so stones. They're just like, That guy keeps buying this shit. Dude, scratch some more dinosaurs out. Most articles about the Yucca stones paint the two brothers as two gentlemen who accidentally stumbled across these stones while excavating on their private plantation, while other articles claim that they bought the stones from the Huaqueros, the Tomb Raiders. They desperately tried to get archaeologists interested in these stones, and the Tomb Raiders apparently even offered to take the brothers and archaeologists to the site where they found the stones, no doubt to conserve Peru's rich history. But no one was interested. However, if you dig a little deeper, you learn that back in 1941, Pablo Soldi, an Inca-based antiquities dealer, had a large-scale operation running in the Yucca Valley, looting archaeological sites at a commercial level. A lot of this loot ended up on the United States art market. In 1959, the American Museum of Natural History purchased over 100 objects from Soldi, which are listed as having come from Oaxaca sites. Now, in fairness, I wasn't able to trace birth records and the like to find out if we're talking about the same Pablo Soldi, but it seems highly unlikely that there were two people with the same name in the same area engaging in the same dubious trade at this time. Oaxaca isn't exactly what you'd call densely populated. Considering their illegal trade, I seriously doubt that the two brothers ever tried to get archaeologists to look into the authenticity of the stones, except maybe the type that they could give a cut of the profits to. They also had a lot to gain financially, if there was as much as a suggestion that the stones were genuine artifacts, so I'm not sure if we can trust anything they had to say. No, definitely not. To my knowledge, they never shared the supposed location of the site with anyone, or if they did, those in the know decided to keep it to themselves. And this brings us to Cabrera's main supplier of Ica stones, the simple farmer, Basilio Uchuya. If anyone can give us some clarity on where the stones came from so we can get a proper archaeological excavation underway, it would be Basilio. However, the Peruvian government had the same idea, and when the existence of the stones started making waves around the world, Basilio was promptly arrested by authorities for selling antiquities, which kicked off a decade-long game of diddy or didn't-he. The guy's got a bit of a problem. It's a lose-lose for him. Either he's doing fraud, or he's selling antiquities. Basilio, no! Facing the prospect of spending years in a Peruvian prison, which I imagine is not brilliant. I mean, prison's not brilliant anywhere, but I always feel like the poorer the country is, the worse the prisons. The farmer very quickly told anyone who would listen, especially the government, that he didn't actually find anything. He'd personally carved the 10,000 plus stones that he claimed to have found. Yeah, to be fair, if someone was like, do you want to go to prison for selling antiquities, or do you want to be, fraud is a crime. I guess it is kind of fraud, isn't it? But selling antiquities seems like a more serious crime than just carving some rocks and selling them to some dumb people. In fairness, I wouldn't want to spend time in Peruvian prison either, so we really can't blame our man for telling the authorities whatever he needed to in order to get himself out of trouble. However, determining how authentic an artifact is becomes kind of difficult if your main supplier can't seem to make up his mind about whether he found them or made them, because he continued telling conflicting stories. Oh yeah, I mean, of course he did, to his benefit, because he's like, no, definitely carved them all. Definitely carved them all, didn't I? Definitely not real, right? Because of the antiquities thing. Wink, wink. Because then you get out of the legal trouble and people still buy them. In 1973, during an interview with Erich von Däniken, oh god, author of Chariots of the Gods, oh god, Basilio Uchuya confirmed the whole thing was a hoax. Wait, is this the conspiracy guy or the anti-conspiracy guy? I just gotta check, I'm pretty sure he's the conspiracy guy. Let me just double check. So what is this? That technologies and religions of ancient civilizations were given to them by ancient astronauts who were welcomed as gods. Okay, he's the conspiracy guy. Basilio Uchuya confirmed that the whole thing was a hoax. He didn't find any of the stones he sold to Cabrera for his museum. He personally made them all. Considering von Däniken's interest, I find it a little strange that our farmer would admit to making the stones. If there was anyone who was going to believe that he found them, it would be this guy. Yes. However, he later changed his story and told a German journalist, Andreas Fischer, the exact opposite. This time, he swore the stones were genuine. He just lied about making them because he didn't want to go to prison. Then, in 1977, he changed his story yet again in the BBC documentary Pathway to the Gods. He told the team that he made some of the stones, even demonstrating the process with a dentist drill and explaining how he faked the patina. He baked the stones in cow dung or laid them out in a chicken coop and let the chickens do the rest. How do you age stones? I rubbed shit into them, boss. I used a dentist drill and then I rubbed shit into them and I sold them to dumb people. Allegedly. I wonder if the chickens got paid for their work. However, he insisted that he didn't make all the stones that he sold to Cabrera. He actually did find some of them. Apparently, the Peruvian government doesn't watch BBC documentaries because miraculously, Basilio didn't end up in prison after this admission and even continued to make smaller stones to sell to tourists. I mean, yeah, but there's a big difference between being like, you said it in a documentary and be like, dude, I was just saying it so to make the story more interesting, dude. It was just a lie. Under oath, I carved them all. And everyone knows I did. Look, you could see my dentist drill. Personally, I think the story Basilio told the documentary team is probably the closest to the truth we'll ever get from our forging farmer. Really? I kind of think he just made them all. However, Basilio wasn't the only supplier of stones for the Cabrera Museum. His neighbor, Irma Gutierrez de Aparca, also provided the museum with a fair number of stones, and unlike Basilio, Irma didn't change her story. Unfortunately, the story she had to tell wasn't the story believers wanted to hear. In 1975, she came forward and confirmed that both she and Basilio had forged the stones they sold to Cabrera using pictures from comic books, textbooks, and magazines. In fact, well into the 90s, local artisans would often visit the Ica Regional Museum to get ideas for their carvings from Nazca pottery and textiles. This explains why many of the engravings look similar to ancient local cultures. The artisans got their ideas from their ancient ancestors, which is kind of a smart move. Those who want the stones to be the real deal argue that Basilio, Irma, and other local artists couldn't have made the stones because they're illiterate. Yeah, they couldn't have made the stones because my daughter, who is 5, can copy a picture of a face. She can copy a picture of a lot of things. It doesn't mean that she's literate. She can barely read, she can maybe read 4-letter words, some of them. But you don't have to be literate to see a picture and copy it exactly. Whoever made that argument is really dumb. I wonder if they're literate themselves. Human beings have been drawing long before we could read. The cavemen drawing mammoths on cave walls in France definitely weren't literate either. Yes, I mean, fucking obviously. A Spanish researcher, Vicente Paris, looking into the authenticity of the Ica stones in the early 90s, made an even more damning discovery. Turns out there were plenty of eyewitnesses in Ica who claimed to have seen Cabrera hand-delivering drawings to local farmers to carve onto stones. He's got a whole cottage industry of forging farmers. These witness reports were later backed up by the farmers themselves. In 1981, Basilio even showed a journalist some of the drawings Cabrera gave him to use for his commissions. Of course, Basilio denied it later, but in 1995 he told archaeologist Neil Steed, who is in South America doing research for a BBC documentary, that he engraved the stones using drawings that Cabrera brought him because the stones were easier than farming. Yes, indeed. Irma told the same story. She claimed that Cabrera himself gave her some of the drawings to carve into the stones, but when he found out that she was telling people the truth about where the stones came from, he stopped giving her work and even told people she was crazy. I mean, yeah, fair play. She also showed the journalist exactly how she made the stones, and took him out to a hill where she dug out 2 small stones and made a crude carving of a little dinosaur in a matter of minutes using a saw blade. She claims that most stones are hard and unworkable, but there are softer stones that work pretty well. She did mention that finding workable stones was becoming harder since she and Basilio had been digging in the same spot for years. Their stones, just go somewhere else, dig some more stones. Vicente also noticed clear red pencil lines on a stone he received from Basilio, who promised that the stone was genuine. It's like, yeah, no, the ancient people. That was their sketch before they started carving. Righto, mate. Another stone, by an unknown artist this time, showed light blue pencil marks in the middle of a groove, and some stones even showed traces of paint and shoe polish. Guys, this is just unreal to the extreme. Lab tests done on sample stones, not from the Cabrera collection since Cabrera wasn't willing to part with his stones, all proved that the stones were faked. It seems that the finders of the stones were in fact the makers of the stones. What? No, never with a shoe polish. It's ancient shoe polish. Eventually, Cabrera came clean and admitted that he had commissioned some replicas from the farmers to sell to tourists, which is a practice museums have been engaging in for decades. Yeah, but in a museum gift shop, you know you're not really actually buying like a dinosaur skull. It's clearly marked as replica. Whereas this guy's like, no, they're real. He didn't say he was selling replicas, did he? But he insisted that he could tell the fakes from the real thing, and the stones in his museum were genuine artifacts. Either Cabrera had been in on the hoax from the very beginning, or he naively believed that all the stones in his museum, provided by the forging farmers, were all genuine ancient artifacts. Well, either A, he's a bit dim, because really, or 2, And I think more likely, he has a commercial interest in saying that they are genuine, because otherwise no one's going to come to his museum to see like some stones that a forging farmer made, right? However, whether Cabrera was involved or not, clearly the farmers probably made the most stones in his museum. But the question is, did they make all of them? By the late 70s, there were around 50,000 stones circulating according to Cabrera's calculations, and there was his own collection, of course, as well as private and museum collections. Apparently, he'd seen some shipping records from exporters who'd been selling the stones abroad. Of course, we have no idea how many stones had been sold to private collectors who weren't stupid enough to let the whole world know they made a habit of buying illegal antiquities. This is a lot of stones for even a handful of farmers to carve by themselves, and at this point, only two names were known, Basilio and Irma. Considering the number of stones and the size of some of the stones, the carvers would have required a reasonable-sized quarry at the very least. However, neither Irma nor Basilio had an active stone quarry in their backyard, so if they carved all the Ica stones, just where the hell did they get all the stone from? Sure, they could have dug them up all over the desert, but still, where did they find the time to hunt down these stones? Remember that not all stones are suitable for carving, according to Irma, and then to carve and transport 50,000 stones, some weighing as much as 500 kilos between the two of them in 10 years? It's quite impressive. Irma claimed that she made 20 to 25 stones the size of an orange each week, so if Basilio worked at around the same pace, the two of them would have needed 23 years to carve out 50,000 stones. Yeah, but there's more of them. He's got his whole little cottage industry of farmers. That meant they would have had to start carving around 1950, but the first stones were only discovered in 1961, according to Buse. I'm very skeptical about the authenticity of these stones, but I have to agree with Cabrera on one thing. The numbers just don't add up. Well, it does if you've got more people carving the stones. However, forging farmers, deluded doctors, and Indiana Jones-style villains aren't the only ones with collections of engraved stones, which is where the story takes a bit of an unexpected turn. Okay, everything we know so far tells us these stones are fakes, but that might not be the case. Please. Oh god, I wonder, am I going to be persuaded? These are so clearly fakes. Some engraved stones have been uncovered by actual archaeologists, and a fair number of these stones were found in other regions, just not the province of Ica. I mean, fine. Of course you're going to find engraved archaeological stones and shit, but they're just not going to be from when was this before? Ridiculously before the current understanding of history and the carving of stones. They're just going to be from that period. In 1968, Peruvian archaeologist and trustee of the Ica Regional Museum in the city of Ica, Alejandro Pazia Asreto, published a book in which he mentions his discovery of engraved stones. While conducting an official excavation at the Ica cemeteries of Maxul and Tomaluz, he discovered 3 engraved stones in different tombs embedded in the sides of the mortuary chambers. Now look, before anyone gets too excited, there were no dinosaurs or flying machines engraved on these stones. Yes, look, if a real archaeologist finds them, of course there's not going to be, because that's not real. It's going to be like, what's that? It's a man. It's a stick man. What's that? It's a bison. Okay. The first engraving was a realistic image of a fish found at the cemetery of Tomaluz, dating to the Middle Horizon period, so around 600 to 1000 CE. There we go. Look, timeline appropriate right there. The second was a realistic llama, and the last geometric patterns that were probably supposed to be a stylized flower. Ascrato had heard about the Ica stones, and like most archaeologists, he was skeptical at first, but his discovery certainly proves that at least some of the stones must be authentic. These stones are currently part of the collection at the Regional Museum of Ica. However, other museums also have collections of engraved stones, including the Nazca Museum and the Palpa Museum of Peru. The stones in their collections are almost identical to the Cabrera collection, with only one major difference. The stones in the museum collections don't have carvings of extinct animals and advanced technologies. So it would seem that some of the stones, not the dinosaur stones, are in fact authentic artifacts and not forgeries. Yes, absolutely fine, that's completely fine. Because finding carved stones in archaeological sites is absolutely going to be fucking standard. They're just not going to have magical flying machines on them. However, in 2001, authorities from the Palpa Museum contacted Dennis Swift, a creationist researcher, and informed of an unusual discovery. An engraved stone apparently depicting a sauropod dinosaur was discovered at a Nazcan tomb complex, dating to between 400 CE and 700 CE. The tomb was located at the far northern end of the Nazca Desert, past the well-known Nazca lines in a river valley near the Rio Grande Palpa. The carving isn't very detailed, but it does seem to have slightly tilted dermal spines along its back. I looked at a photo on the internet and have to admit it does look a bit like a dinosaur. Yes, but looking a bit like a dinosaur does not a dinosaur make. However, since the tomb was found in a river valley, the moisture in the air led to extensive patina formation, which hides a part of the engraving. Unlike Cabrera's dinosaur stones, which have no provenance and only one source, Basilio Uchuya, there were 30 eyewitnesses to this discovery, some of them archaeologists and museum staff. Apparently, the museum even allowed Swift to take the stone to the United States for analysis. I tried to dig up more on this specific find, but sadly, it seems that no one did a follow-up academic paper on this specific stone, so Dennis Swift's article is all we've got to work with. Swift visited Peru when this dinosaur stone was discovered and soon returned to America with 3 sample stones: a souvenir stone made by Basilio Uchuya, a stone from Cabrera's collection, and a stone from the Palpa Museum given to him by the staff. Well, 2 of those are not going to be real, and one of them is... Wait, the Palpa Museum is the one that was discovered in that actual archaeological dig? Yes, okay, cool. All 3 stones contain dinosaur carvings, if you accept that the museum stone is in fact a dinosaur and not something else, which I definitely don't. All 3 stones were submitted to labs for testing. Unsurprisingly, the souvenir stone was quickly identified as a fake. There were metal flakes from Basilio's hacksaw in the incisions of the engraving and no patina buildup in the incisions. Gotta rub that chicken shit in, mate, come on. The Cabrera stone showed some natural oxidation and embedded dirt in the engraving, suggesting that the stone hadn't been made recently. Similarly, the museum stone also showed a heavy layer of oxidation and dirt in the engravings, as well as extensive saltpeter buildup and some lichen growth on one section of the stone. The grooves of the engraving also showed serrations and fissures, which all suggest that the stone and the engravings are pretty darn old, which isn't surprising considering it was found in a tomb during an official archaeological excavation. Unfortunately, patina is a relative dating method and not absolute, so the lab concluded that the stone from Cabrera's collection and the museum stone could have been carved 500 or 2,000 years ago. There's no way to know for sure, but they probably aren't modern creations. Okay, wait, so Cabrera's one could actually be old? In arid conditions, which the archaeological certainly qualify as, it's not uncommon for genuine artifacts to have very little or even no patina at all, even after many centuries. The 3 stones were also submitted for a metallurgical test. The theory was that poor Peruvians would use whatever tools were available to make the stones, while ancient stone artifacts would have showed evidence of Bronze Age tools. Ancient bronze tools are quite rare and would fetch a nice price when sold to collectors, so it's unlikely that a treasure hunter would hang on to something they could sell. These are farmers, they're not master forgers. However, the results were inconclusive. There was no trace of Bronze Age tools found in the museum stone, and while traces of tin did show up in the Cabrera stone, it didn't match Bronze Age tools found in some Nazcan tombs. There are a number of reasons to explain this, like moisture levels and the fact metallurgy wasn't exactly standardized back then, and sample contamination since Cabrera's stones weren't handled and stored by professionals. But at the end of the day, the test doesn't actually prove anything. The stone discovered by the Palpa Museum expedition and the lab tests done by Swift certainly paints a different picture, but it doesn't conclusively prove the authenticity of the stones. So maybe he did actually discover something that was some real ones, but it's not actually going to be a dinosaur. I'm sorry, that's just not possible. Like, I don't believe the modern one's a dinosaur. The Palpa one, sorry, not the modern one. Some of the stones are certainly the real deal, but a few authentic stones doesn't mean all the thousands of stones currently in circulation are genuine artifacts, especially the ones with flying machines and dinosaurs. Cabrera pointed out that even if we date the strata in which the stones were found, it's possible the stones were reburied in the tombs because they were considered to be from the gods, since the Inca didn't understand the extraordinary technologies depicted on the stones. Or the stones are ancient copies carved by the Inca and other cultures, using the originals as examples. These arguments are unlikely, but not entirely impossible. No, I think it's just simple. There were some stones that have carvings on. They're all appropriate, or maybe like, oh, it kind of looks like a dinosaur if you squint, and then the new ones with the fly machines and stuff are all just made up fakes. At the end of the day, the Ica stones appear to be a little bit of hoax and genuine artifact. The stones found by archaeologists are probably real artifacts, which makes them quite valuable. To the local people, many living in poverty, the Ica stones became a solid way to earn extra money. According to Dennis Swift, in front of the camera, Basilio was a consummate showman demonstrating how to make the stones and selling them to tourists. Considering that he got paid for his film appearances, this isn't really surprising. However, Swift also depicted Uchuya as a poor, uneducated, illiterate farmer living in a small house with a dirt floor in extreme poverty. Surely, a man like this couldn't possibly carve detailed images of dinosaurs and technology that he didn't understand. Do I understand how a spaceship works? Not really. Could I carve a picture of one? Yes. I mean, it's not hard. However, according to two filmmakers for the BBC, when they visited Basilio, his house was the only one with a TV mast and a generator. They found him to be intelligent, with a great sense of humor, something I noticed myself traveling in Peru. Peruvians have a fantastic sense of humor. There you go. He was also quite proud of his artistic achievement, and rightly so. He found a few stones, possibly when the river flooded, and using them as an example, carved some more. When he realized he could sell them, he expanded his range, carving all sorts of fantastical images that he copied from magazines. People need to stop underestimating the ingenuity of people living in third world countries. Personally, I don't believe the Ica stones were an intentional hoax played on the world at large to convince anyone that an ancient civilization frolicked around the jungles with dinosaurs. No, some dude just wanted to make a quick buck. Simple. Cabrera, misguided as it was, seemed to genuinely believe in these stones, and it became an all-consuming obsession. The fact that ancient astronaut conspiracies and young Earth creationist conspiracies use the same stones as proof really highlights just how adaptable this story is. You can literally use the Ica stones to prove pretty much whatever you want to. The Ica stones are a great example that sometimes a picture is just a picture. Oh, that's the end. This last page, for some reason, is completely blank. That's the end of the episode. Thanks so much for being here. Appreciate you. And yeah, I'll see you in the next one.